Hey. I left the Next Web about a year ago, and so it's actually great to actually be back. It's like a homecoming. It's fantastic. Yeah, David, fantastic to speak to you. So we're going to be talking about, as Pep said, we're going to be talking about activism and allyship and tech companies having a social and political edge to themselves. But before we do that, I think it might be good just to get a bit of a catch-up on what Tumblr's been up to.
Sure. Well, we just turned 10. That was our big milestone that we hit a few months ago. And as we look ahead, we certainly look back on this last 10 years and where Tumblr started, which was in this moment that was incredible on the internet. We started, if anybody was kind of around and developing software, working in kind of that Web 2.0 moment, it was a moment where all of this kind of media and creative potential of the internet was really coming to life. All of a sudden you had these platforms like YouTube and Flickr, blogging platforms like WordPress and Blogger, making it possible for anybody to kind of express anything in this very democratized way. And you were no longer kind of beholden to these big institutions to take your work and put it out there in front of big audiences. But Tumblr really kind of emerged in that moment out of this kind of frustration, this thing that was missing, which was as much of the creative technology had really moved forward and video on the internet and all of this multimedia had become possible, we'd also seen this kind of diaspora of platforms. So your videos went on YouTube, your photos went on Flickr. If you had kind of articles or essays, they could go on WordPress. If you had short ideas or links, they could go on Twitter. And Tumblr was really an answer to that, a reaction to that, saying we should be able to express the kind of full range of our personalities, of our voice, our expression, our ideas. And you should be able to do that in a place that could truly become your digital identity and kind of you on the internet. So that was Tumblr. That's kind of the moment it came out of and what defined us for the next decade. And as we look around today, the kind of creative functionality of all of these platforms is actually kind of pretty homogenous right now. You could kind of post anything, anywhere, Snapchat, Instagram, even Twitter, now all support photos, videos, all of these things. So as we look out the next 10 years, the biggest missing piece right now doesn't really seem to be creative expression so much as something that really evolved out of Tumblr by accident. And that is this kind of emergence and phenomena of communities. And not communities in the way that we think of communities or social networks on Twitter or Facebook or the Snapchats of the world today. Those are really, first of all, spectacular networks and spectacular tools, but really organized around either people that you know in real life, on Snapchat, Instagram, on Facebook, or organized around kind of the select few big brands, big celebrities, a la Twitter or Instagram today. And what we saw emerge sort of, again, not by any kind of vision that we have, but we saw kind of manifest on Tumblr was all of these people coming together around all of this stuff that they cared about started to find each other. And all of a sudden, Tumblr started to become, as it says up here, Tumblr is a place where your interests connect you with your people. Over the last decade, we've really found, the thing that most of our users come here for, the thing that brings in more than 500 million people every month to Tumblr, are these like-minded communities, passionate and obsessed with the same stuff. So as we look out into the next decade, we're thinking a lot about, as we think out even into the next few weeks and months, we're thinking a lot about how do we really support these communities and be home to communities of often strangers. Very different proposition than a Facebook or Instagram today. Really looking at how do we become home to communities of people that didn't know each other yet, but are in fact obsessed with, passionate about, care about the same things.
Yeah, these communities on Tumblr and elsewhere, they've changed the world, and I think a lot of what we see in the world today, the massive, rapid rate of change, political change, social change, is driven a lot by the way we can communicate and share ideas really quickly and in new ways. One thing we're seeing now is companies having more of taking the step and not being neutral anymore and becoming something a bit more of an advocate for particular values in a way that maybe that used to be marketing, but now it seems a bit more from the heart. And with Tumblr, that seems to be very much Planned Parenthood, and you've got a strong link to Planned Parenthood. So maybe you could tell us a bit about your link.
Sure. And by the way, definitely, that's certainly one of the organizations that I've personally gotten very involved in, and our community has been very, very kind of present for and supportive of. But it definitely, definitely not the only one, and definitely didn't start there. And actually, some of the earliest, kind of communities and movements we saw promoting causes, advocating, standing out. I mean, there were so many so early. That certainly too many to list, but I mean, a few that stand out to me were, an incredible kind of gay rights, LGBT community and movement on Tumblr. And what was just so extraordinary was they were doing so much to move their causes forward. They were educating, they were advocating, they were empowering. That was, taking people in the community that cared, or people sitting just outside of the community that cared and wanted to do something but didn't know what to do, helping them understand how they could become more engaged. And we saw these communities and people across Tumblr doing so much to move these causes forward. And we're sitting there going, this is clearly hugely impactful for the world. It's clearly very important for our audience. We can't just kind of sit on the sidelines here. So the very first kind of putting our toe in the water here was just trying to elevate the stuff that was going on Tumblr already, and just kind of bringing those voices up to the top. I think out of that, over the coming years, Tumblr started to develop this kind of reputation, this place where all sorts of causes, a lot of social justice causes in particular, really did have a home here, really were rooted here. And then along the way, we realized that there were some causes that were deeply important to whole swaths of our audience, of our community, that really still needed a catalyst, needed a little bit more push, because the topics were confusing, they felt too big and inaccessible, but were still deeply important to the people who were here. So that was the kind of first moments where we started to actually kind of push or try and affect change in the world, were around some of these internet causes. So in the US, we recently dealt with and are about to deal with again net neutrality, keeping our telecom providers kind of impartial in how they provide kind of network transit to consumers, so that all of your companies can actually compete and stand a shot up against the Facebooks and Spotifys of the world. Then another piece of legislation called the Stop Online Piracy Act, which was going to be some kind of disastrous government censorship coming down the line later. So in these moments, we saw some things that were really bad, that were about to be happening out there in the world. We knew that they were important to our community. We knew that they were also very confusing and kind of felt very inaccessible to a lot of people in our community. So we did a little bit more work there and started to actually bring in some of the experts, some of the voices who really knew what was going on and what could be done. And we started to build some activations around that. We built kind of education campaigns. We started elevating the voices in our community that were, again, kind of doing the teaching and the advocating themselves. And we started to get folks to again, the big thing here was just understand how they could participate. First, understand why this was so important, and particularly this like weird internet law stuff. I mean, it was just very obtuse sometimes. Just helping people understand why this was so important, what it meant, and then help them see a really short path to how they could make a difference. And the first time we did an activation like that ended up driving tens of thousands of phone calls to our US Congress, thousands of hours spent on the phone between Tumblr users and our politicians, telling them that this was deeply, deeply important to them. And within a few days, got the White House to turn around and the Obama administration to come out and say, net neutrality is important. We need real net neutrality in this country, not a compromise, and actually turn that into law.
These kind of causes, especially in America, they're particularly political. I mean, something like Planned Parenthood or indeed net neutrality is the contentious issues that really strike at a lot of people's core values. How do you square that with being a business? And traditionally, people would say a business has to be neutral and not offend anyone. But I think increasingly people need to take a stand in some direction or another.
Sure. First of all, it's so frustrating that like healthcare and free internet are as politicized as they are in our country. But it's really true. They really are. That's a great question, and it's a question that a lot of us are asking and have not answered yet. It's definitely uncharted water for lots of brands, lots of organizations, lots of platforms like Tumblr.
as a forthcoming subsidiary of Verizon, net neutrality is an interesting issue to.
Absolutely, and by the way, I mean that's one that I'm very excited to continue to play a real role in, hopefully from the inside. I'm hopeful that sitting closer to the folks that are the folks that we need to think honestly, fairly, thoughtfully about this stuff. That we can get them there if we're closer and can spend more time with them. But it's definitely uncharted waters. How does a brand kind of either attach themselves to a cause, particularly controversial or politicized cause? How does an organization actually put themselves out in front of a cause that they see as critically important to either their existence or their community's existence or just to the world at large? We were pretty comfortable going here because it was just so clear that this was so important to our community. There were so many people here that cared so deeply about some of these issues around a whole host of causes, and some of them were really, it was so clear that it was so important to so many of them that us standing by and supporting them was as much us standing beside our community, the people that have invested in Tumblr and care deeply about this place that we're building. It was as much us standing next to them as it was us standing in front of any of these particular causes. So that's the thing that got us not just comfortable with this, but just made this feel so imperative to us. We love this community so much. They do so much here. Tumblr would be nothing if it weren't for everything that they're doing here. How could we not show up for them around the issues that were so important to them?
Yeah, and if you look at other social platforms and the people who lead them, people like Jack Dorsey, he's been very open about his political views over the years, and they've just got Biz Stone back in the fold, and again, he was very, an advocate for free speech in the early days of Twitter, and so they're also the biggest enabler of Donald Trump in terms of his getting his message out there. And I can't help but think that must be maybe something of a conflict in Jack Dorsey's mind there. And a lot of people have said, "Oh, why don't you do something about him?" And Facebook staff were pressuring Mark Zuckerberg to do something about Donald Trump being active on Facebook and things like that. Do you think? How do you approach things like that? I mean,
sure.
Do you get involved in?
So, first, just a thought on. Just a thought on. A reaction you see a lot, which is, Jack or David. We get this a lot too as a platform that tries really hard as much as we can to err towards free speech and allow everybody. Unless you're really kind of directly encouraging violence or self-harm or illegal stuff, we try and give you space to say what you want to say, even when that's stuff that we don't particularly like. Particularly on the internet, you can't really bury this stuff. So pushing it out to kind of dark corners of the internet, one, doesn't really work, but two, actually has a pretty nasty side effect, which is you allow these to become real, impenetrable echo chambers and allow that really nasty, toxic stuff to fester and turn into something really, really bad and scary. If I'm Jack, I'm probably thinking, and it's certainly the same way that we think about this kind of stuff on Tumblr, having this stuff on your platform, even being able to bring it to the surface, is an opportunity to fight speech with speech, to diffuse that really awful toxic stuff with truth, which is a pretty spectacular ideal and opportunity. And I think that's when you kind of really challenge my team, when you challenge Twitter's team on what are you doing about this stuff? Something Facebook is thinking about in a very big way too after the elections. I think we're all thinking about how do we make our platforms better for facilitating more productive conversations. And for the most productive conversations, you need some people that are not entirely like-minded there in the conversation if you're going to learn anything, if you're going to have the most robust, thoughtful conversation that you should be having. And if you're going to change anybody's mind, you need some folks in there who like kind of disagree with you or kind of buy into Trump's philosophy. If you're going to ever reach any of them. So rather than kind of exiling them to dark corners of the internet, Tumblr certainly, and I have to imagine Jack and a lot of these other leaders right now and their teams are thinking about how do we take these challenging, often kind of toxic things that are there right in the middle of our communities, and rather than seeing them as these kind of pernicious poisoning things, look at them as a truth, something that exists in the world, and something that through this technology, through these platforms we're building, we can reach out to in a more thoughtful way than we've ever been able to before.
So you'd not be too concerned if Donald Trump signed up to Tumblr?
Again, I would take it as a real challenge, and I think that's what I bet you ask anybody at Twitter today, maybe not anybody, but I bet a lot of folks over there right now are looking at the opportunity that they have to take somebody who is occasionally a pretty pernicious, vile voice, and surround that in a much more productive dialogue.
There might be people here, entrepreneurs, who are thinking, I should be like this as well. My company should have more of a social stance. Are there certain companies this works better for, or do you have any tips for any entrepreneurs who might want to take that approach? Again,
there's just no playbook on this one yet. I think this is brand new waters that we're all exploring. What I've been feeling recently, as I see more and more, colleagues and companies and all over the world, certainly a lot in New York, stand up and attach themselves to these issues in any number of ways. Education campaigns, driving their users to contact their politicians and representatives. Signing on to amicus briefs, basically making recommendations to our judicial system in the U.S. I'm feeling a very similar sentiment from everybody, which is this is an imperative. There is just too much at stake right now, too much that's going sideways in the world right now for organizations, brands and organizations, which particularly in this world of internet and media and this new extreme of kind of brand and corporate and capitalist power that we have amassed in this world. This is too critical a moment for these influential brands and organizations to sit on the sidelines. There's too much at stake, and we just can't count on the grassroots to be able to go at all on their own. I mean, there have been some extraordinary grassroots movements going on all over the world, as per usual, certainly in the US, which has been really encouraging to see. But there's just so much happening so quickly, and there's real leverage in these brands and companies, and a lot of leverage too in these platforms that amass whole networks of people.
Yeah, and I think it has to come from the heart as well. It has to be something that's actually the company believes in. It isn't just appropriating because it thinks it might be a good way of engaging a certain user base. Take the reaction to the recent Pepsi advert, for example, which was kind of taking on board certain social movements without actually saying anything. Yeah.
I mean, I think you hit on one really important point, which is don't just do it for marketing. Don't just do it, even if it's something that you think is right in the world. You should probably be really putting your weight behind causes that you feel like you understand intimately or are intimately important to you or your users and communities. At least start there, because it's true. Navigating, there is so much happening so quickly. Navigating it could be just wildly challenging. So we have moved. In the last decade, we've done a few of these, and I feel like we've been able to have a pretty major impact and touch a lot of kind of moments and causes that were really important to us and our users. At the same time, that was spaced out over 10 years, and we took some time to really find moments and causes where we said, this is important. This right now is a moment that we need to get behind, a community or an institution that we need to stand up next to and support, and we're going to plant a flag and say, hey, yeah, this is something that we're putting ourselves behind, and we're going to really put some energy into moving forward.
Okay, we've got very little time indeed left, but just in just a few words, are you obviously we're living in challenging social times. How optimistic are you about the future?
I'm tremendously optimistic. Look, it's been incredibly discouraging to see so much. There's been so much heartbreaking stuff come into view in the last few months in the United States. It's been really, really heartbreaking. At the same time, I think a lot of us are realizing that this stuff was already there. We're just seeing it clearly now for the first time. And I think, as jarring as that is, as upsetting as that is, it also means that, this is an opportunity to fix some stuff that was here that we just couldn't see. And that means that we have an opportunity to be a much better country. We're not the only country dealing with any number of issues right now, but certainly I'm paying a lot of attention back home. And I think we have a real opportunity to build a smarter government, build a better, kinder society. For now, just being able to see just what it is that we need to contend with, what truths there are that we have to face, and where we are today, and who we are. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that as many bad guys, challenging people that have made it into our government, that the good guys are putting up a hell of a fight, and I know we're going to continue to. And I think in the end we will be stronger for this. And I don't know. I hope I hope you guys don't hate us by the time this is done. We're working on it, I promise.
Thank you very much, David Karp.